Just because you're not sick doesn't mean you're well. It just means you're not sick.
Right.
Many of us are walking around with nutrient deficiencies, gut issues. We don't have any symptoms yet because we're being able to compensate for them.
When you're symptomatic, sometimes it's too late.
Yeah,
you know?
It can be harder.
Give us some examples of like D3 or other nutrients that are out there that your body utilizes to function, that if you have those deficiencies, what can happen down the line?
So the way I think about this, Sam, is that
we have Dr. Scott Sherr. Hey, welcome.
Today's guest is Dr. Scott Sherr, physician, hyperbaric oxygen therapy expert, COO of Prescriptions, and a leading voice in performance-driven medicine.
How can we help people right now? They're suffering, they're hurting, they have brain fog, they have concentration problems, stress, energy, sleep issues. So the first product we came out with was something called Blueotene. And Blueotene is a combination of methylene blue with nicotine, caffeine, and CBD. Very good for focus, for energy, for getting things done, and getting away distraction.
Why is it that when people get diagnosed, let's say cancer, a lot of the times when they announce it, all of a sudden it's stage 3 or stage 4? What happened with stage 1 and 2?
That's a good question, Sam. I think I was in medical school. My friends and I had shirts made that said, sleep is for quitters. You don't need to sleep when you're alive. You can sleep when you're dead, right? But that's not going to be optimized for your nervous system function. Many people that are just living in this fight or flight, and they don't even know it. Right. And as a result of that, you get mitochondrial dysfunction.
So how do you calm down the nervous system?
Just tell them to calm down, Sam. That's going to work every time, right?
Welcome to another episode of A Healthy Point of View podcast. I'm your host, Sam Tejada, and as usual, we're bringing experts from all over the world to talk about health, wellness, beauty, and mindset. Today, our guest, this guy here, you're going to listen to a little bit about how he got himself in the world of conventional medicine and what he's doing today that's truly changing the trajectory of people's health. Today, we have Dr. Scott Sherr. Hey, welcome. All right, Doc.
That's the best, I think, introduction I've ever had. Thank you.
We're going to make it better the next time you come on.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
So you prefer to go by Dr. Scott or Dr. Sherr?
Dr. Scott's perfect.
Dr. Scott.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Dr. Scott, man, welcome to A Healthy Point of View podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sam. This
pleasure.
is great. Yeah.
Listen, man, I've had the opportunity to really read about you and understand your story. And you're very programmed into this world of functional medicine, precision medicine. And you talk a lot about the stuff that we practice on a daily basis at Liquivita. So I think today's conversation is going to be very unique. It's going to be something that I'm very passionate about. And there's going to be a few things that we're going to be highlighting that you specialize in specifically. But first, before we get into any of that,
Sure.
I want to talk about your story.
Sure.
I want the viewers and listeners to really understand how you even got into medical school to then in the world of conventional medicine, your traditional medicine,
Yeah.
and then where you're at today.
So, yeah, the story starts very young. I grew up the son of a chiropractor, Sam. So my dad was very unconventional, the opposite of conventional, as far opposite as you can get when I was a kid. And so I grew up outside that whole box of conventional medicine. I didn't really understand it until I went to medical school. And then did I really get to understand it? I dove in like head first and was like, holy shit, where am I? Like this is a very, very strange place. But the reason why I decided to go to medical school was that as I was growing up, I was in my father's waiting room, hanging out and coloring. And then I was running around playing sports as a kid. And then in high school, I was collecting money at the front desk at his office. So I kind of saw what he was doing. I really enjoyed the patient interaction aspect of it. I saw how he interacted and I really enjoyed that part. But I also saw that he had limitations as to what he could do. And, when I was thinking about what I did want to go to a school like either chiropractic or medical school, decided on medical school because I realized that it would give me the most breadth of understanding from the conventional side. And then from there, I could kind of figure it out. That's what I decided.
What kind of doctor was your father?
He's a chiropractor.
He's a chiropractor.
He's a chiropractor.
Right.
He's still a chiropractor in New York for 45 years.
Nice.
I'm actually seeing him this weekend as I'm here in Florida with you. And so it was an interesting journey growing up in that really unconventional world. And then I went to medical school, and my goal was to bridge this huge chasm that we have, especially then. This is back in 2003 when I went to medical school,
right?
Between alternative and conventional medicine. There really wasn't anything. Functional medicine was just starting. That really was a very early on. There was integrative programs in medical schools, but it was very, very small.
Right.
And so I ended up, as I was going through medical school, my goal was always, from the beginning, was how can I bridge this chasm? What am I going to be able to do this? And I decided to do internal medicine as my specialty because internal medicine kind of gave me the best breadth of information and got me out of school and training the fastest so I could figure out what I wanted to do. And when I was in medical school, I learned about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, actually. And that was my first major inroad into a field that was used conventionally, as you know,
Right.
but also used very unconventionally in a lot of different ways. And back in 2003, 2005, when I was first learning about it, it was still very new and not being well used outside of the medical system in the US. And so I became very knowledgeable about hyperbaric therapy. And it became my first foray outside of that conventional system when I finished medical school and residency training. And that was initially in California. I became the medical director of a number of hyperbaric facilities. And over about a decade, I created an integrative practice around hyperbaric therapy because I realized that, as you well know, it's a fantastic tool and technology, but if you don't have a good framework to understand how best to optimize somebody before, during, and after hyperbaric therapy, you might not get the benefits that you want, or sometimes it could be even detrimental, right? So I created a whole practice around that, which took about a decade to do. And I was initially medical director of a number of facilities. And then from there, I became more of a consultant. I had an online presence and doing online consulting before it was cool back in 2018, 2019. And then I was searching for a foundation to everything that I did because I realized that hyperbaric therapy is a fantastic technology, but if you didn't have optimized foundation of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, your gut, your hormones, and things like that were really not optimized, that you wouldn't do as well in hyperbaric therapy, especially if you had like a more of a chronic condition. And so from there, I became interested in something called health optimization medicine, which is a foundational framework that was founded by a friend and colleague, mentor named Dr. Ted Achacoso. And I became involved in that both on the organizational side, but also got trained in this foundational framework. And then from there, we created a company called Transcriptions, which helps people right now while they're on that longer path to optimizing their health. And so my clinical practice is a combination of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, health optimization medicine, and being what I kind of call it like a conductor of all things health optimization. So
I like that, man. Health optimization.
yeah,
What's the name of it? Health optimization. What?
health optimization medicine. Yeah.
Health optimization medicine.
Yeah, we call it home for short. It's you talked about functional medicine in the beginning. Like I'm a big fan of functional medicine. I have a lot of friends that are trained in that. Functional medicine is a huge step forward from conventional medicine where you just put band-aids on things and put people out the door. What functional medicine is trying to do is find the root causes of illness, which I think is really great. However, there's another aspect of this, which is what health optimization medicine does is let's focus on optimizing your health first, and then shift the perspective to health from disease. And so if you do that, what you find is that all of a sudden, a lot of the things that you were trying to treat get a lot easier because you have an optimized foundation. And it's a shifting perspective. So we're the first standard of care for health, not disease. There's a standard of care for diabetes, for high blood pressure, for for stroke or whatever, but there's no real standard of care for health. So what we've done is we've shifted that perspective to health, and then we've created a foundational framework that uses the age range of 21 to 30 as the optimal range for everybody. So we all remember how it felt to be 21 to 30 years of age. You could wake up every morning and doesn't matter how much sleep you had or maybe how much you had to drink the night before, and you felt pretty good.
Still got that energy, man.
You still got the energy, right? So then you turn in your 40s and 50s, you're like, well, what happened to my energy, right? So we do is we optimize everybody's levels of what are called metabolomics or metabolites between 21 and 30 years of age. So their hormones, their nutrients, like their gut, their neurotransmitters, and doing that, not focused on a disease at all, is just focused on their health, will make them feel so much better, right? But it's not something that happens initially. Like it might happen 3 or 6 months later where they start feeling much better. And that's where you need to have things along the way. So you have IVs, which are great. You have other things at your facilities. We have a company called Transcriptions that makes products that help people right now with energy, with focus, with sleep, with stress, immune system activation. The goal really always is to use them as a bridge to get people through that challenge that they often will have when they're coming from, everybody wants to feel better tomorrow, but it's not something that's typically going to happen for most people, to get them through that 3 or 6 month period. And then from there, they have this foundation set. They can peel off some of the products and they're on their way, that kind of thing.
No, that's amazing. And coming from conventional medicine and emergency medicine as a firefighter, paramedic, working in the ERs, et cetera, you really notice that the world that we live in, number one, the way that medicine is practiced is very algorithmic, right?
Yes.
It's more disease medicine versus, like how you said, functional medicine is going to be more root cause medicine. But now what we're talking about here, the health optimization medicine,
right?
Health optimization medicine, you don't have to be sick, right? Based on what you're saying.
So the thing is, this is a good thing we always talk about, is that just because you're not sick doesn't mean you're well. It just means you're not sick.
Right.
That's something that Dr. Tad told me a long time ago, the founder, because many of us are walking around with nutrient deficiencies, gut issues, neurotransmitters, hormones, but we don't have any symptoms yet because we're being able to compensate for them.
Well, one of the things is that when you're symptomatic, sometimes it's too late.
Yeah, it can be harder, but it's
Right.
not like it's the end of the, I mean, there are things you can still do. But I remember I was working with an athlete when I initially started this program, doing it with my own patients, and he was at the top of his game, like elite guy. And I looked at his nutrients and gut and thing, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's not going to last more than a couple more years doing what he's doing unless he does something right now, right? Because we have amazing capacity to compensate until we don't. And that's when it's like all of a sudden something happened to me. All of a sudden I fell off a cliff and my energy just went down in the tank. It's not typically because it was just one thing that did that. It was an accumulation of things that happened over a long, long period of time. And all of a sudden you hit some sort of threshold and then you went down, right? And that's when you start feeling, well, wow, what happened to my energy? What happened to my focus? What happened to my, I used to have no pain. I wake up with pain every morning and things like that. So it's not to say you can't work with people on optimizing their health when they're sicker. I work with cancer patients. I work with elite athletes. I work with people that are across the spectrum of health. But it's always better to be proactive, right? It's always better to be, and that's what's so cool about the ecosystem now that you're in, that I'm in, which is that more people are interested in being more proactive, which is not like a human thing. Humans just care really about, typically tomorrow or the next hour, right?
And then it becomes very reactive at that point.
Right.
So Dr. Scott, one of the things that I've noticed with what you're talking about, you just mentioned that, when you start doing some of these things, right, and taking care of yourself, taking some of these supplements, it's nothing that you're going to notice instantly, right? I want to talk about that because I always talk about the three different divisions of what we should focus on, which is prevention, early detection, and then treatment intervention.
Sure.
I mean, I literally have it on the back of this cup.
Yeah,
right?
I was reading about that just a minute ago.
So, and one thing that people have to understand is that early detection is not prevention. Prevention is prevention on its own.
Right.
So when we start talking about some of these different nutrients and some of these supplements that are out there, I want you to give us a few examples. Like, for example, vitamin D, right? Vitamin D3. It's one of those things that if I start taking it today, I don't necessarily feel something instantly.
Right.
And if I'm deficient in it for the next 5 years, and I don't test it to know if I'm deficient, but let's say I'm deficient, I probably won't really notice much of a difference change in my life in the next 5 years. But if I've had this deficiency for a very extended period of time, 10, 15, 20 years, I want you to give us some examples of like D3 or other nutrients that are out there that your body utilizes to function, that if you have those deficiencies, what can happen down the line?
So the way I think about this, Sam, is that when I work with a patient, I use a test called metabolomic testing. Metabolomic testing is a really cool, it's been around for over 20 years now, but it's just starting to hit functional medicine, integrative medicine in general. What metabolomics does is looks at the small metabolites, small molecules that are happening in real time in your cells right now. So understanding what your vitamins, minerals, your nutrient levels are, how well you make energy, how well you detoxify from the energy you make. And it's all what's happening now or what has just happened. What I love about that is that gives me a really good sense of how somebody's actually functioning at this moment. So, genetics, of course, genomics and looking at your DNA can be helpful, but it's kind of a static thing, right? Your DNA is not changing, but your metabolomics are always changing in real time. And what you can do is you can look at various micronutrient or macronutrient issues. You can look at toxicities. You can look at things like vitamin D, for example. You can get a good sense of what their foundational framework of health is now. And then what I typically would do from there is create a foundational baseline of supplements that somebody would take that they can use now to help support their metabolomic levels of various types of things. And that's really the best way to understand what they need over time, is to manage that, to look at those levels over time and see how they shift. It doesn't change right away, though. Like a vitamin D level will come up over about 3 months. A vitamin B6 or like all your B complex vitamins will take about 3 or 6 months to get better. But what you're really talking about, Sam, is that if you go for a long period of time and you have deficiencies or toxicities, what's going to happen is that the system's going to start breaking down. And the biggest place that you see this typically is in your mitochondria, right? And the mitochondria are the part of your cells that make energy. We talk a lot about metabolic health these days. Metabolic health really just means that you can't make energy. Can you make energy effectively? And can you detox from the energy you make? We don't make energy like an electric power car or more like a gasoline powered car. We
Right.
have inputs in and we have exhaust out. We have ATP, we have CO2, we have oxygen. Excuse me, we have CO2, we have water, and we have what are called reactive oxygen species. So, are you metabolically healthy? Means you're able to make energy effectively from the food that you eat, and at the same time, you're able to detox effectively from the reactive oxygen species and waste products we make of making energy. And so, where I see a lot of issues over time is in mitochondrial function. Is if this starts breaking down, everything else starts breaking down as a result of that. Because if you can't make energy effectively, you can't meet your energy demands, and the system starts going into these various cycles that, as a result of the energy cycles not being optimized, you're not getting enough energy to the various organs that you need it, including your brain, for example. And then you start seeing symptoms develop. You start seeing brain fog, concentration issues, mental health disorders. You see inflammation, pain. There's a lot of reasons why the mitochondria start breaking down, but in the end, that's what you start seeing is that this breakdown process. And so if you can get people on the right supplementation, you get them on the right diet, lifestyle, and manage their stress, optimize their supplementation, their medications and things like that, then that's when you can see the biggest shift in how people's trajectories are going to be. But it may not be immediately, as you said. It may be 3, 5, 10 years down the line that you prevented them from having mild cognitive impairment. You prevented them from having a stroke or a heart attack or like even a fracture, like for example with vitamin D and other things. And of course, vitamin D is a really powerful antioxidant as well. So. Right. I don't know if I just roundabout your question a little bit there, but that's kind of how I think about it from a framework.
No, that was you answered it. So would you you were talking about the mitochondria,
yeah,
right? Mitochondrial health. What data points are you utilizing to test for mitochondrial health?
So right now, what we're using, there's a lot of things that are newer to the market that are looking at supposedly mitochondrial function directly, but those are new and not well validated yet. There's a couple swabs and things like that that are out there for mitochondrial function. What I typically use is organic acid testing, which is something you can use if you go to like a functional lab. Like I use Genova Diagnostics.
Do you use Genova Vibrant as well too?
I don't use Vibrant as much. And the reason I use Genova mostly is that their normalized age range is between 21 to 30 or about that.
Which fits. Exactly.
Yeah, it fits, right? So Vibrant, I like, but the problem with a lot of the other labs out there is that they normalize their normal levels to somebody between 18 and 65. And so that's okay. They're healthy 18 to 65-year-olds, but that range is a little bit wide for me. Like a good example of this is if you go get your thyroid check now, your TSH, right? They average out thyroid levels for somebody who's like 8 years old to 90 years old. And then they make a normal range out of that huge range of people, right? Do you want a thyroid level that's closer to a 91-year-old or closer to an 8-year-old, right? And so you have to be very careful with normal levels, right? And that's why we call it optimal ranges instead of normal levels in general. But so I use organic acid testing. What's nice about that is you can look at all the various intermediates that are responsible for you helping flip off electrons from your food, because that's why we eat fat and carbohydrates, is really to make electrons that go into our electron transport chain, part of the mitochondria to help us make energy. So you can look at all that. You can also look at antioxidant status. You can look at heavy metals. You can look at fatty acid status. You can look at oxidative stress levels as well, and things that might be mucking up the membranes or the mitochondria itself. So they're indirect measures. There are some newer measures that are coming out that supposedly say that they can measure direct mitochondrial function, but the gold standard is called a punch biopsy. They punch you in the leg and they take a piece of part of your muscle,
right?
And they actually look at your muscle under a microscope in real time to see how the mitochondria is working. I think that these tests are getting better, but what I think is really important is that you look at it in the context of the person and how they're feeling and what you can kind of potentially be able to do with them now to help, and then over the long term and kind of see clinically how they're doing. But you can measure organic acid levels very easily in patients over periods of time. That's how I typically do it. And then I'm also doing a very good clinical history to understand how they're feeling, and then kind of watching them over time as we're starting to do interventions that might be helpful to them now, and then things that can help like over the long term, right?
Absolutely.
So, because like there's short-term things that can help now, which are great. But because those other things, optimizing B vitamins and optimizing electron flow and antioxidant status, these don't work immediately. They take time. That's why sometimes I use IVs actually. Sometimes especially if they're significantly antioxidant deficient and they have a lot of mitochondrial stress, like using IVs can be very, very helpful in the short term there. As you optimize and build up their levels and you have them on oral after that can work really well for some people depending on the situation. So I've used it in that capacity. And I've also used other, interesting compounds, like one called methylene blue that I think you know of as well.
You
That
do the intravenous one or oral?
I usually use oral methylene blue. I mean,
Okay.
I've used IV in the past, but the nice thing about oral methylene blue is that you can take it home, right? And it's a little bit what's interesting about methylene blue in general is that it's a fantastic what's called a redox cycler. It can help with energy production and also can help with detoxification. So it's like the electric powered car, right? You can give more energy to the system without causing a lot of stress. The challenge with IV sometimes is that depending on the dose, is that if you give too much can go to the brain too quickly for some people, causing some more symptomatic kinds of things. But if you keep the dose pretty low, I find that IV can be very helpful. But over the long term, oral can be very, very helpful because it has this significant impact on that mitochondrial function.
Absolutely.
And if you can support mitochondrial function, people start feeling better now. And that's what you want, right? You want to give people enough motivation, like, wow, I do feel a little bit better. Now I can go do the harder work of optimizing my supplements, optimizing my diet, getting out of a shitty relationship, or doing some harder work of working with trauma that has a child or whatever it might have been, right? Sometimes it's so difficult because you don't have enough energy,
Yeah.
Like the two main complaints that I get as a clinician, and I've actually corroborated this with other clinicians that I work with or colleagues. The two main complaints are not enough energy and anxiety, right? And the problem with it is that these things feed each other, which what I mean by that is that if you don't have enough energy, your mitochondria, the part of your cell we're talking about, they flip into this mode called the cell danger response, which actually puts your sympathetic system in higher gear, which is your fight or flight nervous system. And as a result of that, you get more anxiety, right? And then that anxiety feeds your mitochondria with all these hormones and neurotransmitters that increase the stress on your mitochondria, right? So you have this terrible loop that starts
Is this
happening.
what you call the sympathetic spiral?
You got it. Yeah, this is called the sympathetic spiral of doom. Yeah, but dun dun dun. You guys should have music for that. Yeah. But the sympathetic spiral of doom is this loop where you get this sympathetic activation, which is this fight or flight. So everybody, I think, knows the fight or flight part of it, but our nervous system has two components. One's called the sympathetic nervous system. The other part is the parasympathetic nervous system. And so the sympathetic nervous system is what our fight or flight nervous system is, the one that keeps us, if we're getting chased, it helps us run away. If somebody's underneath a car, we can lift the car with superhuman strength, maybe, depending on the type of car, but that can help get the person out of the car. The parasympathetic nervous system is our rest, digest, detoxification, and recover nervous system. But most of us are living in that sympathetic dominance most of the time. And that's just because of how society is operating, right? We're not programmed now to think about relaxing. We're thinking about how much hustle, how much we can do in a certain period of time.
Nonstop.
And I grew up in New York, right? It's the city that never sleeps. And I didn't grow up in the city. I grew up on Long Island, so to be clear. But at the same time, that culture is a big part of it, right? And so I was in medical school. My friends and I had shirts made that said, "Sleep is for quitters." Right? Because you don't need to sleep when you're alive. You can sleep when you're dead, right? But that's not going to be optimized for your nervous system function. And so you have this significant component of people out there, many people that are just living in this fight or flight, and they don't even know it because they've compensated for a while until things start coming off and the wheels start falling off the car, right? And then that mitochondria, the part of your cell, gets all these stress hormones that are getting released all the time if you're in that sympathetic. Right. And as a result of that, you get mitochondrial dysfunction. And that's one of the main reasons we have mitochondrial dysfunction, which is this sympathetic spiral, this sympathetic activation. So you can have the sympathetic because of a bad job or a stressful job or stressful life because you have kids at home. I have 4, right? And then you're not getting enough sleep, or you have a bad relationship, or you have a snoring partner in the same bed as you. It's not going to make you sleep very well, I promise, Or if you've had trauma as a child, you never feel safe. I've had patients like this, right? There's nothing I can do, no supplement I give them. And this is interesting, right? Because there's people that I've met over the years, patients, where it's almost immediately understandable. I almost immediately understand that there's no amount of supplementation I can give this person if I don't also calm down their nervous system.
Right.
Because it's like, and I hate to say this because my conventional doctors will say it all the time. It's like, oh, I'm just giving people expensive urine because I'm giving them, like, if you take a vitamin, it's just expensive urine. That's what a lot of conventional doctors will say. They are right. If you have somebody that comes in that's in this sympathetic spiral, in this sympathetic overload, there's no amount of supplementation you're going to be able to give them that's going to help them over the long term. Short term, maybe, but long term, no. And this is just, it's not going to happen. And so the key really in that case is to calm down the nervous system and find ways to do that. And so supporting the mitochondria at the same time is absolutely essential, because if you just calm down their nervous system without supporting the mitochondria at the same time, they're going to feel terrible because you're turning off you're taking down the gas pedal, but you have nothing there to show for it, right?
So one of the things that I know you talk about is the body, mind, and soul, right? And how the mitochondria bridges those three. So I want to talk about that because we're talking about
Sure.
someone who's going nonstop in this sympathetic spiral of doom,
Hmm.
right? And if you don't calm down that nervous system,
Yeah.
that can cause an issue in all these different facets that we're talking about. So how do you calm down the nervous system?
Just tell them to calm down, Sam. That's going to work every time, right? The last thing you want to tell somebody that's sympathetically activated is to calm down.
Right.
Because I promise you, it will not work. It's like telling your wife or your spouse, like, you just should calm down, because that's going to go well,
that's
right?
not going to go
That's
well.
not going to go well, right? It never does.
Not
right?
at all.
And so the key is to understand, like, as a clinician over the years, what I've realized is you have to find a way in, right? And the question always is what that way in is going to be. And then the way I've done it, for a lot of people that are really this, because so many people are type A right now, like they want more information. They think more and more and more is going to be better. But we now know, most of us know intuitively, that actually taking things off of our plate is actually going to be better for us if we can, and focusing on the things that we truly love, enjoy, that give us purpose. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to figure that out, right? And so what I often talk about is the GABA system. So GABA is our primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. It's one that calms down the firing of the brain. So we have our primary excitatory neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is our kind of gas pedal, let's call that. And then our GABA is our brakes. Now, most people probably haven't heard of either of those neurotransmitters. They've heard of norepinephrine and dopamine fasting and serotonin and things like that. Those are your superstar neurotransmitters, but it's actually the glutamate GABA balance that's the most important. The glutamate is excitatory, GABA is inhibitory. So I talk about the balance between these two neurotransmitters. What happens when you're always in this sympathetic spiral is that GABA level goes down. It's deficient. And so the challenge with that is you have less GABA around, you have more anxiety, you have more insomnia, you have more depression, and you have more mental health problems, right? And so if you go to your doctor and say, Doc, I'm feeling depressed, anxious, insomniac, whatever, I'm an insomniac, and I have mental health problems, they're not going to be thinking about your GABA levels, right?
No, they're going to try to give you a pill.
They try to give you a pill. They try to give you an SSRI. They're going to try to give you an antidepressant. And we now know, I'm sure you probably know this too, Sam, is that when I went to medical school, we used to think that people with depression had low serotonin levels compared to the average person that did not have depression. But we now know that's all bunk. Was all misguided. So people with depression have no lower serotonin levels than people that don't have depression. Now, if you give somebody an SSRI, they will feel better, but it takes 4 or 8 weeks, maybe. There's also a black box warning on those drugs. In fact, I know the person who advocated to get the black box warning on those drugs because her sister, died, unfortunately, of suicide after taking one of those drugs back in the 1990s. So they're not without risks, of course. But we have much better data that people with depression are GABA deficient than serotonin deficient. And so if you can optimize those GABA levels, you can start seeing the brain, the body, everything start calming down. So what I often say here, Sam, is that what we need to be able to do is show this person, this individual, one of my patients in this case, what it feels like to calm down their nervous system. And the fastest way to do that is to improve their GABA levels. But you cannot give them GABA as a supplement, because GABA as a supplement is too big to get across into the brain. So if you're taking a GABA supplement, for example, and you feel relaxed and calm, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, like I take a Quicksilver Scientific. They have one that's
Yeah.
I think it's like a liposomal
Yes.
or sublingual. It's a GABA L-theanine.
Yeah, so Quicksilver is the only exception here, because Quicksilver has the nanoliposome, which is really,
Right.
really small. But other GABA supplements on the market is too big of a GABA to get across. If you do take a GABA supplement and it does work for you, it's probably because it's called your blood-brain barrier is leaking. It's leaking things in that shouldn't get in there. And that's causing inflammation, most likely in the whole body. Most likely the sort of the nidus of that is going to be a leaky gut typically. So if you have a leaky gut, you also have a leaky brain. Sorry, but you can optimize your gut and your brain barrier gets better. And I've had patients that have been taking GABA supplements, making them feel better. And then we optimize their gut and their GABA supplements stop working because you've optimized their gut, you've sealed that up, and now their blood-brain barrier is working better as well. And so they don't have the capacity. So the key with optimizing the GABA system is to look for supplements that can enhance it in various ways, the GABA receptor, but without being GABA directly. So I use things like kava, CBD, CBG. We have a product called Trocom at Prescriptions that has those, along with something called nicotinal GABA, which is a vitamin B3 attached to a GABA. And the B3 has a transporter that gets across the blood-brain barrier. And then you have the B3 and the GABA in the brain, which is nice.
Nice.
We also have something called Agarin too, which is in one of our sleep products, a couple of our products actually, because Agarin's a long-acting compound that binds onto the GABA receptor, and it's from a psychedelic mushroom, the Amanita mushroom. So it's the mushroom with the red cap, the white spots. Santa Claus is supposedly coming from the Amanita mushroom in Siberia, or Alice in Wonderland, and there's other kinds of even Mario Brothers has this mushroom. But this mushroom is psychedelic, not in like the tripping balls way of like psilocybin, but more in the way of kind of like a sort of like an ethereal kind of state. Like it gives you this sort of luminal state without feeling too out of it. But it also can cause nausea and vomiting, actually.
Yeah.
So because there's two main ones in the mushroom, one called ibotenic acid, which is neurotoxic, one called Agarin, which is the long-acting one that works.
Yeah,
on the
you have to be
system.
careful with the dosing on that one.
Yeah, Agrin's you have to be very low dose. So we typically use 1 milligram or maybe 2 milligrams tops in it. And what's nice about this is that formulating on the GABA system is very, very, very important, because you can also go out and go drink a whole bunch of alcohol too. That's going to work on the GABA system, but that's not good for us, as we know, right? Because what happens with alcohol, with benzodiazepines like Ativan, Valium, and Xanax, with sleep drugs, what these all do is bind to the GABA receptor, but they deplete GABA in the process. And as a result of that, you get GABA deficiency, which gives you all the things that I just mentioned before. It also gives you dependency, tolerance, and withdrawal for these drugs, right?
Wow.
So the way we formulate is by combining something that binds to where GABA would bind on the receptor, and something that binds on a separate site called an allosteric site is the fancy name. And that combination prevents GABA depletion. And there's no other companies that are doing it. We have a patent on this kind of process as well, because the key is to give something that's to enhance the GABA system, but not deplete GABA in the process.
Right.
But that's the short term, Sam. Like in the long term, you want to give people the feeling of what it feels like to be parasympathetic, to downregulate their nervous system. And when they do that, that's when you have an in. That's when you can say, okay, now let's do some breath work. Let's do some meditation. Let's find you some yoga classes. Let's also look at the long term. Like, why do you have so much stress? What is it that you think? And is it because you had trauma as a child? Because you had a significant medical illness for a long period of time? That'll do it too. There's lots of things that'll do it, but those take longer to address, right? But if you give people the experience of like, oh, that's what it feels like to actually breathe, then like, okay, now I know how to get back there, right? Now I know where there is,
Right. Have you ever tried any device to do like a vagus nerve
Yeah.
reset?
Yeah, those can be great. Those can be great too. So there's the vagal nerve stimulators. There's the auricular nerve ones as well. There's a couple different meditation devices
Yeah.
that are pretty good. There's another company that makes a vibration one that I like
Yeah.
a lot. They're friends of mine too. So
Yeah, I do the brain tap. Brain tap helps with a lot of
Yeah.
relaxing the mind. Guided meditation. I've tried to do like the regular meditation. I can't really get myself there. So
yeah, guided meditation is good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the big thing about meditation for people is that, I mean, when I first learned about meditation, I thought it was like you have to have no thoughts. Like that's not going to happen unless you're on like a
Right.
very high dose of psychedelics or some other drug that will quiet your mind. But in general, your mind is going to be actually more noisy when you try to meditate, because your brain, your ego is trying to like get you to get out of that. So the key is just observing your thoughts. I tell my patients all the time, I send them this very simple infographic that just says, just spend a couple minutes just observing your thoughts. Just do that. And
Yeah.
then over longer periods of time, you can do it for longer, and it actually becomes a superpower, right? Because you don't get taken away by every single thought that comes into your brain after a period of time
Yeah.
of doing this.
Doc, let me ask you a question, man. And I know that you've probably had your share of friends and family members that fall into this bucket. And especially being a medical provider, you've seen this. But why is it that when people get diagnosed with some kind of really bad illness, let's say cancer,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the times that friend or family member, when they announce it, all of a sudden it's stage 3 or stage 4. What happened with stage 1 and 2?
That's a good question, Sam. I think since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of these what are called sort of turbo cancer kinds of things. And there are some thoughts that the particular virus, the COVID virus specifically, caused this sort of senescent, it's called this sort of like this very fast aging population of cells in many people, causing these sort of like younger people getting cancer, younger people getting these diagnoses. I think that's one piece. I think that I mean, and that's a big significant piece, right? And I've been seeing that a lot, but that doesn't negate the need to build a foundation, do everything that we've been talking about. I think the other aspect of things is that, and this is the big piece, I think, overall, even with the COVID and the pandemic, is just that the toxicity that we're subject to at earlier and early ages is just out of control, right? Everything from the food we eat, to the water we drink, to the air we breathe, to the sheets that we sleep on, to the detergents we use. I mean, when I work with a patient, it's just amazing to me, what people have in their homes, just the amount of toxicity. And
Right.
so I have a friend of mine, her name is Jill Carnahan. She's an MD. She's great. She talks about a toxic bucket. And I like this analogy because what she describes is that everybody has a different size bucket. Some people have small buckets that can't take a lot of toxicity, and all of a sudden they go over that threshold and start, having symptoms, having early cancers or progressive cancers or regressive cancers. You have people with really large buckets. It's like I don't know if you remember George Burns, but like the guy that could, smoke cigars until he was in his 90s or 100 and have no issues at all, right?
Right.
So you have this, and like my wife's family is they're all Scandinavian. They all live into their hundreds, and like
Mhm.
I hear my wife's father is over eating KFC, like, and he's in his 80s. And I'm like, you could do that in your 80s. If I did that, I'd have a heart attack the next day, right? Like, you have certain people just have sort of genetic predispositions to be able to really be able to take a lot of toxicity. But the challenge, I think, is that most of us don't fall into that, larger bucket. Most of us have smaller buckets overall, and then we're overfilling those, right? And so there's the whole science. It's called exposomics, which is the science of toxicity. And now we can measure toxicity. We can
Right.
measure it in the environment, as you know. We can measure it inside plastic tubing, as you know as well, and then with microplastics and things like that. And we can also measure this inside the body by looking at various metabolites. I was talking about metabolomics. We look at signs of toxicity. We look at things like, plastics. You can look at, glyphosate. You can look at other sort of corresponding aspects of what happens over time. Is that when you have a lot of toxicity, is that you have a lot of need for antioxidants, right? And over time, you're going to deplete those antioxidants. And as a result of that, you're going to have less of those. And then you're going to be more subject to more stress, and you can't neutralize that. You can't compensate for that. And so I think the biggest reason, Sam, overall, is that just have more toxicity at younger ages. And so it used to be that very difficult for somebody from 21 to 30 years of age to feel bad. Like you could do like a lot to this person, and then the next day they would feel fine, right? I don't think I really fall into that category exactly, but in some things probably, right? But I had a friend of mine in college, right? He was of Irish descent. Like, he could drink himself vomiting and falling asleep in an elevator, and the next day he could run a marathon, right? And so that's a double-edged sword there when it comes to that kind of liver. But anyway, I just seen this trend, and I see this even in I have kids. I have 4 kids. My youngest is 15. Like, I see people and we know like the amounts of pharmaceuticals that kids are taking now is just absolutely crazy for depression, for ADHD, for anxiety. Like, anxiety is such a huge issue.
Yeah.
You get people started on these medications when they're 7 or 10 or 12. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's crazy.
yeah.
But with like that cancer patient that comes in all of a sudden at stage 3 or stage 4, what are the symptoms at stage 1 and 2? Why does cancer hide so well?
Well, the thing about cancer in general is and you have to think about this from a terrain perspective, a foundational perspective, right? If you don't have an optimized immune system, so you're making cancer cells every day, every moment of your life, right? But your immune system is, if it's an optimized immune system, is going to find those and take care of them before they start causing an issue, okay? So what happens is that as our immune system gets more dysregulated, we don't have the same capacity to address those cells at their early stages. And then some of them, get through the cracks, right? And so symptomatically, people won't have symptoms if they have 1 or 2 or 10 or even 100, sometimes 100,000 cancer cells, right? These are relatively small. But what's happening there is that the immune system and the body's not doing what it's supposed to do to take care of these kinds of things. And that's because we have all these early all these aspects of our biology that are not being addressed: our vitamins, our minerals, our nutrients, our mitochondrial function. Like, mitochondrial function is a huge piece here, right? If your mitochondria are not working well, the energy production system is not working well, this dysregulates everything. And we know now, like, there's a significant interest in understanding the mitochondria as a big nidus of why cancer starts and why cancer becomes so aggressive in so many people, right?
Right.
And so we have to think about focusing on that foundation. And that's really the key.
The mitochondria.
Yeah,
The mighty mitochondria.
indeed. Yeah.
So, Doc, you earlier you talked about different things that can help with people that are dealing with anxiety, stress,
Yeah.
which we know that stress is a true killer, regardless if it's good stress, bad stress. Stress is stress; it'll kill you, right? So, for the people that you were talking about that might go to alcohol,
Yeah.
where they feel better because of what you said attaches to the GABA, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They feel good. They gets all GABAergic all very quickly. But
So
yeah.
what does alcohol truly do? What does alcohol truly do to an individual when they're taking it? Because a lot of people they want to drink it to kind of unwind at the end of the day of work or on the weekend to get a little shit faced with their friends, you
Sure.
know. So but truly what's happening to them when they're drinking this alcohol?
I mean, there's multiple levels to answer that question, right? I mean, I think the main thing that you're describing there, why people drink, is because it makes them feel more relaxed, makes them feel disinhibited, so they don't have as many stress signals. Like their brain is not stuck in sort of a mode, what we call the default mode, which is our default mode network. It's called the DMN, which is a part of our brain that tells us, my name is Scott, I live here, these are my kids, these are the things that I do, these things that I don't do, these are my likes, these are my dislikes. When you have more GABAergic tone, so you relax all of that, you're not as stuck. So you feel better, right? But the problem with that is that the GABA receptor is very, very sensitive to alcohol, which means that when you drink alcohol, what happens is that you bind the alcohol to the GABA receptor very, very tightly.
Okay.
And when that happens, you feel good, but then it unbinds a couple hours later. And that's when you wake up 2 hours after going to bed and feel terrible, right? And alcohol also has various metabolites that are also toxic to the liver, for example. And the liver requires these enzymes, including an antioxidant as well, like glutathione, to be able to process and detoxify from the alcohol itself. And so what happens is that over time you deplete your antioxidants in your liver, for example, that are trying to detoxify all that alcohol that you're drinking. And you become more subject to having more capacity or less capacity, excuse me, to be able to detoxify from other things as well. So over time, what happens is that you get more inflammation because you downregulate your capacity to make GABA naturally, and also you deplete your antioxidants at the same time, causing more incapacity to what's it called? To compensate for the inflammatory load that you have on a regular basis. And as a result of that, what's going to happen is that your body's going to become more and more inflamed. The alcohol is going to cause more and more inflammation.
From the oxidative stress.
From the oxidative stress, exactly.
Right.
And as a result of that, everything starts deteriorating. Liver function deteriorates, but on the macro scale, but on the micro scale, it's the mitochondria, again, that's have significant deterioration. And then your liver starts failing, and then everything else goes by the way. That's my least favorite diagnosis, is liver failure in patients, because it's one of the hardest things to treat.
Right.
And when I was working in the hospital, which I did for many years, there were people that I saw come in that were like in their 20s with liver failure.
Wow.
Because they're drinking so much, right? Like I drank a lot when I was young as well. And I'm actually really happy. I don't know if you know this, Sam, but like the rates of alcohol intake now are significantly less compared to they were when we were kids, right? And so when we were kids, it was the thing that everybody did. But now people have alternatives, right? Which is great. And not all of those are great alternatives. If it's going to be a lot of like THC, I don't think kids should be having a lot of THC, for example. But alcohol itself, I mean, people just die terrible deaths with that stuff.
Yeah, I've seen it do a lot of damage. So in your professional opinion, what is the safe amount of alcohol?
We don't know right now if there's any safe amount of alcohol. I mean, what I say is that the best way to drink alcohol is if you're an Italian family, like drinking it like in a Mediterranean climate, and you're having your wine and you're having your meal, and it's becoming part of your parasympathetic response, right? So there are some antioxidants in red wine. I think that having it with meals and having it, I think the key here, Sam, is that what I think about a lot, a friend of mine, like we were talking about a patient of hers where she had all these food sensitivities, like everything she ate, like she'd have a sensitivity to, right? But as soon as she started being more intentional with her meals, enjoying them, eating them, taking her time, having them with family, not scrolling her phone while she was on her field, like she stopped having sensitivities, right? Because I think a big part of this, a huge part of it, is finding ways to feel parasympathetic, feel relaxed. And that often requires community. Like, what is your community? Like, is it your family? Is it your friends? Like, how are you calming yourself down, you know? And if a little bit of wine is part of that, I think that's completely okay. But if it's wine to wind down after your kids go to bed, if it's wine after a day of work because it was so stressful, those are not the way to use wine. Like it's the use cases, right? Like, so the way I think about it, I don't drink wine. Wine just makes me want to go to bed. I remember, like, I was just dating my wife, she was before she became my wife, and we went to a party, and she's like, let's share a bottle of wine. Must have been in my 20s. I was asleep by 10 o'clock. It was New Year's Eve, actually, I remember. And so her friends thought I was kind of a dud, but I was like, I just can't drink wine. But I think if wine's done in that capacity, where it's done, in a family setting, in a community setting, where there's food, there's drink, there's laughter, like, then that's the way to do it. But don't use alcohol to go to bed at night. Don't use alcohol to wind down in the evenings. Like, that's when you really have to be thinking, what are the other things I could do?
People are using it as almost like as a dependency at that point.
Yeah.
And I'll comment on it. Obviously you're the doctor. For me, what I tell people is there is no safe level of alcohol, right? I'll still have my smoked old fashioned. I'll have a glass of wine here and there.
Sure.
But if it was really up to me, I'd love to see myself not even touch it ever again. Because at the end of the day, alcohol is a poison. Your body recognizes it as a poison. There's no medical benefit from alcohol being introduced into the cellular system.
Right. Yeah.
But you're right. When people start to make it where it's becomes like the medicine,
right?
That's a problem, because now you're using something that's toxic for it to be your medicine. So why don't we find other things? So, like, for example, a lot of the products that you have here that you're addressing some of these type of symptoms, or things like meditation and vagus nerve reset. There's a lot of technologies out there. So now, when it comes to alcohol, what happens to your biology? Does it worsen that stress recovery that you're having? Because most people are like, oh, let me get a glass of wine because I'm stressed out.
Right.
Is it really fixing the stress?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's not fixing what's going on underlying the stress itself. There are natural ways to bring down your nervous system. You mentioned a couple of them, right? You can talk about meditation or breath work, but these take time, they take effort. People don't like to do those things, right? Because they take time and they take effort. They want to take something. We all want that magical thing that we can take to make us feel the way we want to feel. That may work in the short term, but in the long term, it's not the solution. Even some of our products that we've made, I think that we have a great one called Trocom, for example, that I love, patients love. And it gives you that capacity to downregulate your nervous system. But I'm very clear with my patients, like, this is not a long-term solution.
Right.
This is something you can use in a pinch. You can use it when you're on an airplane, when you have family dinners, it's the holidays again, it's stressful. Yeah, that's when it's great to use. But over the long term, you should be looking at ways of, well, why am I so stressed? What can I do to manage my stress better that's going to be more long-term sustainable, right? In the sense that, is it optimizing mitochondrial function? That can be a big part of it, right? If you have a lot of toxicity, if your gut's toxic, if you're leaky, if you have a leaky brain, these are things that you need to address to help address your stress response, because it's manifesting and augmenting your stress response to not have those things optimized.
Right.
So for me, it always comes back to first principles. It's like foundational principles. It's like, let's optimize your diet, your lifestyle, your supplementation. Let's do some metabolomic testing. Let's optimize your environment. Let's talk about your relationships. Let's do all these things. But those things are not sexy. They're not the sexy things like, I want to go drink my bottle of wine tonight with my wife again, right? Because we know that's going to calm us down. So it's always about having a conversation with people to take them and give them things that are going to help them now, because we all need those things. But then giving them the long-term play, which is like, do you want to live a long time? Do you want to live as healthy as you can? This is what we call health span, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of emphasis on longevity these days, but you don't want to live a long life if you also have a lot of morbidity, a lot of pain and suffering throughout the way. You want to have as long a life as possible that's as healthy as possible, and then die as quickly as possible. That's what we call morbidity compression. So you're living as healthy as you can until you die very quickly is the idea.
Right.
And so that's what most people want if you ask them that, right? And so that's what we want to provide them. But we need to get them there, right? We also need to give them things along the way, because you're going to have stress. You're going to have insults. It's all part of the human condition. You're going to go travel on an airplane. You're going to have sick children. You're going to get sick yourself. You're going to have sick parents. Like, these are all things that are going to happen to you. So what are the things you're going to do to help you those times? But what's the foundation you have so that everything else gets easier, so that you don't get as, knocked down and as you would have otherwise, right?
Right.
You don't want to get knocked down and get up again. Everybody gets knocked me down. So
That's a song.
Yeah, I was going to sing it, but I don't.
So You mentioned earlier about IV nutrition.
Yeah.
And the benefits of IV nutrition, which, there's a lot of doctors out there, especially in the conventional medicine world, which they look at, any kind of these nutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids going intravenously, and they think that this is a bunch of wacky yakkadoodle type of stuff that the doctors in the functional medicine space are doing. So I want you to respond to that.
They also think that checking only 2 B vitamins is all that you need when ever you go to the doctor, right? Let's check your B12 and folate. And then if those are good, you're fine, right? Everything else is going to be normal, except all those other B vitamins you didn't check, or all those antioxidants you didn't check, or all those gut metabolites you didn't check. And so, look, I'm trained conventionally. I understand the mindset, which is that if it's not a randomized placebo-controlled trial of so many thousand patients, that I'm not going to believe it. But the problem with that is that those take a freaking long time. And then oftentimes you can't really do those things for things that are naturally occurring in the body, like some of your vitamins, for example, right? And so where I think that IV nutrition really can come in is a great bridge for patients, a great way to bridge them, as we were talking about, when they're first starting, when they have nutrient depletion, they're antioxidant depleted, they feel like crap. Like, it could be a nice way to help them feel better faster and get them repleted faster, as opposed to taking things just orally, which can take, as I said, 3 or 6 months to get them there. So I think it could be a great bridge. And I think it's a great thing for people under certain types of additional stress, right? If you have a stressful, if you're going on a trip, or if you're feeling like you're getting sick, or if you have something else in your body that's causing a stress or immune system response, then using IV nutrition can be great. I mean, when I go to a new city and I know that there's a lot going on, I'm going to get an IV because I know it's going to give me some additional support. Like, I might get some peptides, I might do some other things, right? So just to give me some additional support. So when I'm shaking hands and kissing babies, as I know you do as well, like, you got to be immune system supported. Like I was just at a conference in Vegas, and it was like, those things are like super spreader events, man. Like, and like half my team came down with the flu. I didn't get it this time, because I was optimizing all the things that I know how to do, and using some of our products. We have something called Tromune, which is great, which is a great immune system product. I'm using some of Quicksilver stuff, and I use a lot of different things to help support me. But using IV can be a great way to give you that additional support. So I'm a big fan of using it. And I know the way that you do it specifically, which is like really trying to tailor it to the person and really kind of give it in this more of an ecosystem of safety, of accountability, of understanding preservatives and plastics and things like that, which is I think the forefront of this world.
So let's talk about some of the stuff with IV nutrition, because when you go into this world of IV nutrition, and listen, like any business, there's always a few bad actors, right?
Sure, of course.
Where you go into their clinic and all of a sudden you think you're at the smoothie shop, and you're kind of picking what you want. So I know you're a very data-driven type of physician. So I want you to talk about the importance of having specific data points before actually engaging in something like IV nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, what most of these sort of shops do around that have these kind of menus is that they make the doses so low that they're not therapeutic, but they're also potentially not going to be harmful either. And that's how they get around it, right? But the best way to do it is to have data, to know what you need, and then design your IV nutrition around what's required.
Right.
Knowing that there's only so much you can do with oral very quickly, and that you can use what I often do for glutathione, for example, is that if somebody's super low, what we'll do is IV for a couple weeks, maybe a little bit longer, and then we'll have them on oral at the same time. Or maybe we'll have them on some precursors like NAC, for example, and then monitor their levels and see what they need, right? But like the key really, I'm a huge proponent of this, is that you do not guess what people need. You test, and you test what they need. And then from there, you find out what they need, and then you give them what they need, right? And you monitor it over time, right? That's the key. It's not just one static data point. We are not static. We are always changing. We're like that flowing river that you never step into the same river twice. We're that same kind of thing. We're that biology that's always shifting. So we have to understand that we're looking at data points from one period of time. We follow those data points over time. And then people are going to go and do crazy things and, go to, raves and MDMA parties and things like that, and come back and like, you look at their labs and go like, what'd you just do? And they're like, oh, I went to this. I'm like, okay, that's why. All right. And so that happens all the time in my patient population. But like the key for all of this, whether you're doing metabolomic testing like I am, and then optimizing things over 3 to 6 months, or you're doing micronutrient testing and you're testing, and then you're using IV supplementation, IV nutrition to help optimize, you need to be testing over time, right? Like that's the key. And the key is to be personalizing this. It's not just a one size fits all. And that's That's the problem. And you and I are both on the social media side, much more, you more than me. And like, you see people out there saying like, you should just take 2 kiwis a day.
Right.
Or just have a handful of blueberries. That's all you need to do, and you're going to just optimize your health. Like, no, stop. You know,
And
like
it really
like,
needs to be more personalized to
right.
the individual. Would you say that most of your medical practice at this point is primarily N of 1 data with your patient?
So what I do is I use this framework called health optimization medicine, and I use it via telemedicine from my house in Colorado. And I work with patients on getting their data and then optimizing their data directly. So this is not evidence-based medicine. This is what we call evidence-informed clinical care, right?
Right.
Because this is something that we've developed, which is something that Dr. Ted, the founder of the nonprofit, as well as Transcriptions, very smart guy, kind of decided on, because you really can't do evidence-based care of things like nutrition, for example, right? Because you're giving somebody something that they need. Where is the study? Well, they're deficient in it. You give it, right? And so what I do is I'm very much personalized with my approach. And what I always say to my patients is that you need to have a foundational number of supplements that you take on a regular basis, because these are the things that you need, because we tested what you needed. This is what you need, right?
Right.
Like in 2018, 2019, I remember giving a talk where I said, this is at a biohacking conference. I'm like, well, how many people are taking supplements? Everybody raises their hand, right? Just about. But then the next question I asked is, how many people tested what they needed and are taking supplements based on that? About 30% of people raise their hand,
Wow.
right? Now that's higher now, right? That was 7 years ago now, but at the same time, it's still not as common to test what you need. Like, do you want to have some fun with some supplementation that you didn't test? Like, so for example, my base level of supplementation, about 80% of what I take on a regular basis is stuff that I've tested that I need. And then it's about 20%, I'm like, oh, let me try this for a month. Let me see how I feel. Let me try this for a month and see how I feel. And that's okay. But you need to have your base of what you're doing. And then from your base, you can add, like I add methylene blue to that. I add, we have something called Trocom, which is a cordyceps extract. I'll use that for a month, depending on what's going on. Or I'll use them just for the 3 to 5 days at a time, and just as something to help improve my immune system or improve my mood or calm me the hell down or whatever it might be. Like, so I'll use things periodically, but we all should have a base that we're taking on a regular basis. Or we're using various supplements or IVs in this case in very intentional ways, and then testing things over time to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and not clocking the system in ways it shouldn't be clocked.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you commenting on that. Now, Doc, when it comes to IV nutrition, there's a lot of different IV nutrition out there, right? We see people utilizing these multi-dose vials as frequent as you can imagine, right? Especially even with patients that are dealing with autoimmune issues, cancer patients that are receiving not just a little bit of vitamin C. I mean, these patients are receiving 25 grams, 50 grams, 75 grams, up to 100 grams sometimes, which is quite a bit. It's multiple vials.
Yep.
So I want to talk about the importance of utilizing preservative-free nutrients when you're doing IV nutrition versus preservatives, which the known preservative is benzoyl alcohol, which we kind of talked about alcohol earlier.
Right. I mean, this is like a very big conversation, Sam, because the supplement industry in general is self-regulating. Okay. Nutrition, IV nutrition, it's the same thing. It's self-regulating, which means that the FDA is not under the purview of the FDA is not to regulate supplements. So if you take a supplement, you better hell know the company that's making it is making it as cleanly as possible. So does it have heavy metals in it? Does it have, did they do microbiology testing? And with IVs, it's even more important because it's going directly into your veins, right? So you have alcohol, other preservatives that are going in there. Like I've seen this with peptides, for example, people having local reactions. I'm like, well, what's going on? These are preservatives that are typically causing the reactions. It's a big deal, right? And so you have to think about these kinds of things. And so you like everything else, like you don't want to take your mitochondrial support with a side of heavy metals, with a side of alcohol, right? And so like with methylene blue, for example, which is something that we use a lot, often contaminated with lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, right? You don't want those things. You're using it to support your mitochondrial function. You're not using it to get more heavy metals and make things worse, right? And it's the same thing with an IV. It's like you don't want to use these alcohol and other preservatives as much as possible for the same reason, right? You're using it to support mitochondrial health, you're using it to support nutrition or help with vitamins, minerals, and nutrients and things like that. But, or, in a cancer diagnosis, right? You don't want to give somebody a whole bunch of toxicity at the same time as you're giving them like their vitamin C or whatever. So it's a big conversation. I talk about it a lot because what happens a lot is like a lot of the supplement companies will get ingredients from other countries. Just okay. Most actually supplement companies are getting their ingredients from other countries. It might be
Right.
Japan, China, Korea, it might be India, for example. But what often happens is that these supplement companies will get a certificate of analysis from these manufacturers from these other countries and take it at face value and put it into their products. That is a bad idea, right?
Yeah.
Because we
Wow.
know that there can be lots of issues with all that,
Right.
forgeries and things like that. I don't know if you heard that there was this big creatine gummy scandal recently
Oh,
where
really?
all these creatine gummies had zero creatine in them.
No
Even
way.
though if you went on their website, the manufacturer said that they were perfect, right? So this is a Chinese manufacturer. It's not just a Chinese thing; it could be anywhere. But it was said the Chinese manufacturer of the creatine said it was exactly what it was, right? It
Wow.
was forged documentation, right? So what we do at our company is that all the raw ingredients that we get, including methylene blue, they come into the United States. We test them again with an independent lab to make sure they meet the specifications. So very few companies are doing that, right?
That's crazy.
And then once it meets our spec, then it goes into our products. And then after it goes into our products, we test it again to make sure that it meets our spec so that the label claim is what it says. And so the challenge with a lot of liquid methylene blue out there, for example, is it never meets their label claim. Like the potency is never what it says.
Right.
And then people tell me they're taking like 10 drops a day. I'm like, how much are you actually taking? Like, I don't know. I'm like, well, that also drives me crazy because they have no idea. But as a result of all this, like, it's such a big deal. I know you're part of
Yeah.
an organization that helps regulate on the IV side. Like, we are very much a proponent of understanding exactly what's in your supplements. And the worst place to get your supplements, Sam, is Amazon, unfortunately.
Wow.
The problem with Amazon, if it's being fulfilled from an Amazon warehouse, is that a lot of that, at least some of it, we don't know how much, is counterfeit. And we have some of these bigger companies out
That's
there that have
crazy.
gotten, slammed. Like Metagenics actually is very famous for this. They had millions of dollars worth of counterfeit stuff in Amazon warehouses. And so if you're going to buy supplements on Amazon, try to make sure you're buying it from the company that you actually respect and you actually care about, and they actually care about you, right? As opposed to like your Prime shipping. I know everybody
Right.
loves Prime shipping. The problem with Prime is that it's in their warehouses, and so we'll never do that with our products, for example, because we just don't know we just don't know the quality control of what it's going to be. So
Yeah.
I know that's hard. Everybody wants to buy their supplements on Amazon, but everything on Amazon, but
Quality, man.
yeah,
It's
it's
so
the key.
important.
And
Yeah.
then with IVs, with supplements, it's really, really important.
Yeah, man. Doc, earlier you were talking about how people could use CBD, to help regulate the GABA, right?
CBD
Is
is
it?
one of the things that can do it. Yeah, yeah.
So but I actually sit on the advisory board of a company called Pico CBD. They're the
Okay.
first in the world to develop sterile injectable CBD
I've seen this.
that can
Okay.
go intravenously.
Yeah.
Which is some of the stuff we're seeing with the studies in the university is incredible.
Super high
You know?
doses, right? Like super high doses of
Yeah,
CBD?
yeah, it actually doesn't even need to be
Okay.
super high dose. The interesting part about having CBD that can go intravenously, what they've done, they've created it into the pico molecule, which is 1,000 times smaller than the nanomolecule.
Okay, sure.
So it gets across that blood-brain barrier, and it gets into certain areas of the body that you could never do it with like an oral tincture
Sure,
or something
sure,
like
sure.
that.
Yeah.
So, which you already know, there's thousands of clinical studies on CBD, which
Yeah.
have really good positive outcomes. But now the bioavailability is just at a whole different level. So,
Super cool. Yeah.
obviously, a bit about CBD and full spectrum and the different cannabinoids that are
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk to the listeners and viewers of like what CBD can really help you with, especially if you have that type of bioavailability.
Well, that's a really cool project that you're on with that. I mean, I did see them at a conference recently, I think over the last year. What's interesting about the cannabinoids, the non-psychoactive ones, we're talking about CBD, CBN, CBG, those are the ones that I know most of. They work on multiple different areas of the brain. They work on what's called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is this system in our body that's kind of like what's called like a homeostatic system. It's our balancing system. So it's super important from everything from inflammation to stress to energy production, so many different things, right? And then they're also what are called promiscuous, which is kind of a funny word, but that's what we use for molecules that bind to different types of receptors. So it's these cannabinoids, non-psychoactive ones, bind to the GABA receptor too. They bind to the serotonin receptor. They bind to the GABA receptor, and they increase the amount of GABA, the affinity for GABA itself to bind. As a result of that, you get this calming effect. And part of that is the endocannabinoid system and the balancing aspect. And then also this other neurotransmitter called anandamide, which you probably know of. Anandamide is a neurotransmitter, not a lot of it, but it's called our bliss neurotransmitter. So what CBD does is it prevents the breakdown of this particular neurotransmitter. So you have more anandamide, so you feel more blissful when you take it. The other cannabinoids actually do something similar, but CBD much more than the other ones. But it binds to the GABA receptor, binds to serotonin. So it has this sort of this effect on multiple receptors, causing decrease in stress, decrease in anxiety from a macro scale, decreasing inflammation. It's neuroprotective. And then if you have a higher bioavailability, obviously you're going to have a higher propensity to have those kinds of effects. That's very, very promising. And so I use a lot of CBD, but I don't usually use it on its own. I usually use it in combination, typically with other things together that are working on the endocannabinoid system or working on the GABA system, as I mentioned earlier. But I think CBD is a great one. And it's one that I think is now hit the mainstream, right, as far as oral. But the bioavailability is definitely an issue with CBD, especially the various types of tinctures out there. And so what we use at our company is we use an isolate. So it's CBD isolate, CBG isolate, CBN isolate, depending on the product. And those have their own effects, right? But there's also the entourage effect, as you mentioned earlier, which is an important one too. If you have terpenes in there and things like that, that are also going to be very, very helpful as well. So there's different strokes for different folks, Sam, as they say. And I think it really depends on the person, what they're interested in, what they're going to be sort of navigating and gravitating towards. Because there's some people that don't want to do cannabinoids for whatever reason. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We can do some other things instead, right? So so I'll kind of navigate. But the great thing is that we have a lot of different options for people. The key is to understand, is to zoom out and go, okay, on the meta level, what's really going on here? Is this sympathetic spiral of doom ongoing? Like, where do we need to break this? How can we do this in a very natural and a very supportive way, right? And then short term, and how we can do it long term, and then how can we support mitochondrial function? And so I always try to zoom out, right? And I zoom out. I get lab data on my patients, and I look at that from a zoomed in perspective, but also everything's a network, Sam. So you can't just look at one node on the network. You can't just look at one node in the network and just think you can just do that, right? Because it's going to have an effect on everything else, right? This is where I think a lot of TRT, for example, is very misguided. Like if you're just looking at testosterone, for example, and increasing testosterone, but what about your growth hormone? What about your thyroid? What about your adrenal glands? What about looking at your gut and your nutrients and things like that? Like it's misguided, right? And I know that people feel better, obviously, on TRT, right, because they have more testosterone, but that's really not the entire answer oftentimes. So the way I always think about this is that we have to think about it in a network way.
Yeah, man, I completely agree with that. We see it every day.
Yeah.
It's you got to treat the whole body.
Yeah.
The person as a whole. So there's a lot of testing that's required to be able to do that as well. But the having that knowledge to understand that is the first step. Doc, the biohacking space has grown tremendously.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of biohackers out there doing a lot of crazy different things, taking all kinds of different supplements and, riding their bikes up mountains and doing this and jumping off of this thing. And everyone has the best next thing, So my question to you here is, I want to talk about blind spots. What are some of the blind spots that you've seen from these biohackers that are technically doing everything right?
It's funny because I've been in this world for a long time, Sam. I went to the first ever, maybe second ever biohacking conference in 2014, 13, somewhere around there. And at that point, it was like the Wild West. People were walking around with like suitcases full of capsules and saying, hey, you want to try my new supplement? Want to try my new supplement? Want to try my new technology? Like, so it's matured a lot, which I'm happy about, right? Because I think it needed to do that. Because now it's more foundational in various ways. But the problem with biohacking in general is that it doesn't have a foundation. If you're just looking at the new technology, the new supplement, the new ayahuasca journey you're going to do next week, you're forgetting about that foundation. And that's what health optimization medicine is for me. It's that foundation that I can give to my patients to give them a foundation that everything else lays on top of. It's like the bottom of your pyramid, right? Because if your bottom of your pyramid is nice and strong, you can try all your crazy biohacking things, but at least you have a foundation where everything is laying on top of, right? Because if you're looking at that next supplement, that next tool, the next technology, but you don't have a foundation where everything is going to be sort of like that sustainable base, then it's just dopamine hits, man. That's all it becomes. I think the big blind spot is that the next technology is going to help you. The next technology is going to help you. Now this one, now that one. Now some of that might be true for a little while, but if you don't have a good foundation, it's not going to be sustainable for you. Yeah. And so I love the idea of having like your biohacking lounge in your house now. Like I have my own sauna. I have a hyperbaric chamber. Like I have, my equipment, my gym equipment. I have my lights and things like that's all great. But if I did all that stuff without having like what's my what's my vitamin, mineral, and nutrients, like how's my gut doing? How are my hormones? Like then all that stuff becomes like just kind of fluff, to be honest. And I think that that's the biggest blind spot in the biohacking world. And what I think health optimization medicine is a great framework for biohacking, because then you have a foundation, then everything else becomes, what are you going to do on top of that foundation?
Right.
So how are you going to use your hyperbaric chamber? How are you going to use your lights? How are you going to use your sauna, right? Like these are all things that I think are great, but if you don't have something foundationally for them to sit on, it all becomes like sort of like these sort of, what's the word the visual I'm getting is just like, it's all just like bouncing balloons. It's like, okay, but like, where is it all? It's all just helium, man, like where's that foundation?
The basic foundations. Yeah. Agreed. So Doc, right now there's a big movement that's going on right now. The MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again.
Sure.
So, the MAHA movement, they're doing some great things, but at the same time, we don't want the MAHA movement just to be this fancy name that everybody knows. So when it comes to systemic health reform, in your professional opinion, what is it that's really needed to make America healthy?
I love that question, Sam. It's a difficult one, but an easy one for me, because I've thought about this a lot with my team, Dr. Ted, who I work with very closely. I think the real challenge is you cannot fix the system from the inside. It's impossible. There's so much red tape. There's so much bureaucracy. You need to create a system that works in parallel. And I would love that system to be health optimization medicine, really, because it's really looking at foundational health principles, looking at taking things from the sick model, even the root cause illness model, and bringing it into like, how can we keep people healthy, right? That would be my goal. But I think in general, we need to have that conversation, which is that yes, you can take red dye out of the food supply. I think that's important. Yes, you can talk about environmental pollutants. These are all very important, but that there's still this foundational biology piece that is missing, and I think that that's really where I would love the conversation to go, which is this foundation, as I keep kind of coming back to. Because if you can work on this foundation, everything else is going to get easier. You can keep people healthier for longer periods of time. You can improve their health span, which is what everybody wants, right? I think this is such an important piece. And I think the other piece that I would really want to talk about more, which isn't being talked about, is this sympathetic spiral of doom, because it's this sympathetic activation, this sympathetic overdrive, this fight or flight all the time, can't sleep, can't find ways to de-stress, always stressed, always on, don't know how to turn off. Like this is what's killing people, right? And so if we can have more of a conversation about that being the main driver, one of the main drivers of everything, of mitochondrial dysfunction, of cancer, of whatever, heart disease, of it all, and then find ways to give people back some of the calm in their life, even just a little bit, it would go a huge way, right? A huge way of helping people. And so I think those are the two conversations that I'd love to have. What's the foundational health that we can really provide for people by looking at the system, by creating a new system, really? And then the second would be like the overarching, which is this sympathetic spiral. How can we show people that there's a new way, right? It doesn't have to be, sleeping when we're dead. It doesn't have to be, working ourselves to the bone, to the ground so that we retire and then we die 3 years later, right? And so you see this so often, right? And like in your lines of work, especially, right? Yeah. People, work and then then it doesn't work out that well after that. So a lot of times, and so those are the conversations I love to have. And like the stress one, hits home for me because this is how I tend to be as well if I'm not careful, which is go all the time.
Right.
Don't sleep as much as I need to, right? And then as you get older, you just don't have the capacity, even if you're trying to be optimized, like to really be able to bounce back as well. And so it homes for me. I have 4 children. I care about their stress. I care about their health, and they're now eating too much ice cream in Miami right now as we sit here, probably. But that's okay. Like it's okay to, like, the thing about it is that there's a context. Like we're talking about red wine. If you're drinking red wine in the setting of family and meals and laughing and great, right? If you're having ice cream with your cousins and like it's a vacation, then have your ice cream, right? Like have your cake and eat it too, right? But but also not all the time, because it's not something that we should have. And so it's a funny conversation with my kids, for example, like, Dad, you said you like pizza, but you don't eat it. Why? Like, if you like something, shouldn't you eat it? I'm like, well, there's a difference, right? I can like something, but not have it all the time, right? And so I think those are the conversations that I like to have.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the foundation, man. You got this product here, so I want to go through them
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so people kind of understand what it is that you've put together and why.
So this product suite, we have a company called Transcriptions. I can pick them up, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah.
to make it easy here. I don't know what we have first. Will be player's choice. The Blueotene here. So Blueotene. So what we decided as a company, this company Transcriptions, was how can we help people right now? Like they're suffering, they're hurting, they have brain fog, they have concentration problems, stress, energy, sleep issues, right? So the first product we came out with was something called Blueotene. This is this one here. And Blueotene is a combination of methylene blue with nicotine, caffeine, and CBD.
Oh
So
wow.
it is very good for focus, for energy, for just getting things done and getting away distractions. And so for 3 to 5 hours without any come down or crash, it has a little bit of CBD in there, helps round it out so you don't feel too edgy on it. And I love it. And it's also nicotine, people get scared of it, but very low doses of it if you don't smoke it or vape it. Anti-inflammatory, great for the brain, great for your nervous system, actually, as calming it down, interestingly enough. So people think nicotine's a stimulant. It is in the brain, but in the body, it calms you down because it actually enhances your vagus nerve, interestingly.
Right.
So this is, we were the first company that came out with a methylene blue product in 2020, right before the pandemic. This is the one we came out with,
Nice.
Blueotene. It's great. I use it periodically. I use it a lot in my patients with more chronic complex medical illness. I have chronic brain inflammation. They do well, and also my elite athletes and my professionals that really just want to show up. That's how they do it. So that's Blueotene. And so the cool thing about these two, which I can open them up and show them here, they're called troches. They're a buccal troche. So there's a dissolvable lozenge that goes between your upper cheek and gum.
Mhm.
And what's nice about that is it bypasses digestion, so they work faster. And also they're titratable, so they're scored, which you probably can't see there, but they have like a little line. You can do a quarter, half, or full, and you can find the right dose for you.
So
So
typically, what would someone start off with?
a quarter,
With that one. A
quarter this one, and half is typically the dose for most people.
Okay.
The one thing about methylene blue, though, that people should know is that methylene blue is very, very blue. And as a result of that, if you dissolve in the mouth, your mouth is going to turn blue. So you may not want to do that right away. We'll get that later. It's okay. This is our Just Blue over here. So what I should say about that is that, like in the Blueotene, the one I just showed, that one is better in the mouth because it's going to be faster. But our Just Blue, which is pure methylene blue here, this is 16 milligrams. So a full troche is 16. So people start with a quarter, half, and full. Typically take it in the morning because it's going to give you more energy. But the nice thing about methylene blue is it's not a stimulant. It doesn't make you like stimulated. It's not like your caffeine crashes and things like that. You get straight up energy and you get sustainable energy. So you get it for about 4 to 6 hours. So I use it a lot in patients, my family as well, with energy, focus, inflammation. It really does do a great job supporting that mitochondria, which we talked about earlier. This is kind of my base for a lot of people, is to use methylene blue, the Just Blue, because it gives them that mitochondrial function, that mitochondrial support, energy, detoxification. I use a lot. Actually, the nice thing about this, actually, you can combine it with red light. If you combine methylene blue with red light, it's synergistic. So methylene blue and red light work in the same part of the mitochondria. So you get this synergistic energy, this synergistic, just feeling of just clarity, which is really nice. Great for brain fog, great for people that have, attention issues and things like that. You can also use it with sauna. I use it a lot with sauna because people that are going through saunas, like they're typically detoxing and they don't feel that great. Just Blue in combination with the methylene blue gives them a little bit of energy and detoxification capacity. So you feel energized after a sauna instead of feeling like, wasted, which is nice.
Nice.
And then we also have this product here. This one's called Troz. Troz is our comprehensive sleep solution.
Okay.
8 different ingredients in this one. Most people think of sleep, they think of melatonin, but there's actually at least 4 or 5 molecules of sleep that are really important. So melatonin is important. That's in here, a little bit of that. We also have 5-HTP, which is serotonin, and CBD, CBN, which are the endocannabinoid system. And we have adenosine. Adenosine is our neurotransmitter in our brain, has multiple functions, but in our brain, it actually gives us sleep pressure. It makes us want to fall asleep. We have adenosine in here, something called cordycepin from the cordyceps mushroom that also increases adenosine, or is adenosine-like. And we have anochiol and agarin, which are both working on the GABA system. So it's the most comprehensive sleep support out there on the market.
Nice.
And it's probably the most novel with some of the ingredients in there. And it's really something you can use periodically, or you can use it more regularly if you need to. And then we have Trocom here. Trocom is our relaxation, anxiety decreasing formula. Works very quickly, but doesn't make you feel tired, which is nice. So it's anxiety reducing without making you feel like you're sleepy, which is great. Again, quarter, half, or full. You titrate all of our products. which is nice because you can find the dose that's right for you. You can take this during the day. We talk about this being from the boardroom to the bedroom, because you can use it when you're giving speeches or giving talks or using, on podcasts and things like that. And you can also use it as something to wind down in the evening. So you can take it as you would take alcohol, for example. This is much more supportive as a result of the way we formulated it. It has kava, CBD, CBG, and also the B3 GABA in there, which is great. And you can also use it in the bedroom. So performance anxiety is a thing for males, right? You can use this to calm down your nervous system and relax. And it actually, so people don't know, many people don't, like, an erection is parasympathetic. So you have to be calm, relaxed to get an erection. And sympathetic is ejaculation, actually. And so more parasympathetic for longer, this is going to be happy for people like your partner in the bedroom. So it has that nice capacity. So Trocom is great. I use it a lot, and I feel like it's really great as a supportive for just calming down the nervous system. But again, my hope actually, Sam, and I think you probably agree with this, is that my hope actually is that people need my products less as they get more optimized.
Right.
Just like they need less IV nutrition as they're doing better over time and optimizing their diet, their supplementation, their stress, all those kinds of things. And that's my goal. That's our goal with our company, is like, it's our bridge, right? And then over the long term, you can take it when you're stressed or when you're traveling. Methylene
as needed at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
So Doc, we're going to have a little fun here.
Yeah.
One of my favorite podcasters, Stephen Burlett, with The Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
He came out with these conversation cards.
Okay.
So you'll open that up and just pull a card from the middle somewhere.
Any card.
Any card.
All right. See what we got here.
You'll read the card out loud and answer it.
I don't think this is the right card. We get another card. Okay.
All right.
Here we go. First one was a blank one. So, question is, what did you learn from your greatest failure? This is a good one. I learned there's only so far you can get intellectually, Sam, before you have to realize that not everything is going to work just because you want it to work. And that is because there's more to life and to the flow of life than you realize. And there are other things that are coming and going that you have no idea until they arrive, right? And so I remember I thought that a certain business of mine was going to work, it was going to grow. And then the people and the things, it all just kind of went down. And then this happened a couple times where I thought things were going to go a certain direction and it all just kind of went down. And then I realized, actually my first 3-day fast was during this. I decided, you know what? I've heard this keto thing. Let me try this. Let me just do 3 days of fasting and see what happens. This is back in like maybe 2016 or so, 2015. And so I did 3 days of fasting. Somehow all my children were not at the house. I don't know how this happened, but I had 3 days by myself. And I was meditating and I was realizing, I was having like this, like sort of almost a psychedelic experience after 3 days of no food, realizing, oh, wait, my brain, my body, this ecosystem that I thought was just related to hard charging. No. There's much more going on than I realized, right? And then I realized that all I needed to do was just open myself up to the availability of what was going to happen and start throwing shit at the wall and seeing what stuck. And that's how everything sort of started coming into place for me, right? And getting out of my own head, right? I'm a very type A person in general. And then just knowing that you can get out of your own head is really, and get out of your own way.
Right.
And that's really what I realized I had to do, was get out of my own way. So
awesome, man. Awesome. Well, Doc, as we wrap up here, man, if there's anyone listening or viewing this podcast that resonates with today's message, what is that one thing you can leave them off with?
Well, can I curse or can I not curse?
Yes, of course you can.
Calm the fuck down. And I mean that in the most nice, supportive way possible, right? And I said earlier in the podcast that you never want to tell somebody that's stressed to calm down. But the reason why I say it here is that take a biopsy of your life. Are you finding time to relax? Are you finding time to wind down? Because if you're not, it's going to catch up with you over time. And as a result of not being able to do those things to calm down, your biology is going to break down over time, no matter what you try to do, no matter the best biohacking devices that you have, I promise. And so the main thing I would probably take away from this, I hope for people, is that we want to be able to learn ways to calm down now and then over the long term. But a lot of this depends on your biology, and optimizing your biology is a big deal. So don't just put band-aids on things. Try to find foundational frameworks that you align with that can help you. Work with a provider that helps you understand what your deficiencies and toxicities are. Find a community that helps you understand that you can have a little bit of wine with your bread. And yes, you can have some gluten. It's okay if it's with like in a parasympathetic way. So I think the main things would be learn ways to calm down. It's super, super important. And the other piece would be to establish a foundational framework that you feel comfortable with that's going to give you sustainable health over the long term. And that's not going to be with your primary care doctor, I'm sorry to say.
Right.
It may be with a functional medicine provider that you really trust. It could be with somebody that's trained in something like with me, health optimization medicine. But stop chasing and start relaxing.
I love that. And if people want to find you, where can they find you?
So I guess my website would be the easiest place. Dr. Scott Sherr is my name, DrScottSherr.com. That's kind of where everything is. If you're looking more like social media, at Dr. Scott Sherr, DrScottSherr on Instagram. Very nascent on YouTube, but going to try that in 2026 and beyond. And also my company's Troscriptions, at Troscriptions on Instagram. And we also have a pretty big YouTube channel along with, where else? Troscriptions.com, our website. If you're a practitioner listening, we have a whole practitioner line of products, and we have a practitioner portal with lots of great stuff on prescribing our products as well. And then if you're interested in a nonprofit, it's at homehope.org is the website, and at homehope.org on Instagram as well. So
amazing. Dr. Scott, it was a pleasure having you on a Healthy Point of View podcast. This is a message that the world needs to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Awesome. Guys, you heard Dr. Scott. Calm the fuck down. Guys, all jokes aside, you got to calm the fuck down, right? Stress will kill you. That's the last thing you need. You heard it from him. He said that it will damage your biology. There is absolutely nothing more important than your health. Without your health, you have absolutely nothing. So we're living this high stress lifestyle, doing all of this stuff where we're damaging our biology. We're getting sick with all of these chronically diseases, these chronic diseases that you're seeing our parents go through, close friends. Calm the fuck down. There's ways to do it. You got to build that foundation. If you feel like you're not the one who needs this podcast, you know what you got to do. Share it to your friends, your family. Someone needs this podcast today. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, do all that fun stuff, and we'll see you for the next one.
You're a pro.